some scales on the side here, and that's a little subroutine we've written, and it's rather like the scales on some graph paper. The actual screen is just over 1,200 points along the bottom and 1,000 up. So along the bottom we're setting off or scaling up in hundreds, so 100, 200, 300 along the bottom, and 100, 200, 300 going up the side on these.
So January is 100, February 200, and so on.
Right, you've got to think of it in that way.
Okay.
And there's our little program that's going to do it.
Now, 10, the first instruction is go sub 500, so at position 500 there is that subroutine which creates that graph.
Yes, that's where it starts, the subroutine.
A little more complicated than this looks.
Yes, it's quite a detailed piece of program, but not very difficult.
All right. Now, if a month equals 1 to 12, that means nothing to me.
Well, that's the start of what we call a loop, and that's really linked into this pink thing next here. And as a piece of protocol, we've indented here what's inside the loop that we're going to do a certain number of times. So you can recognise those two.
Indenting is a kind of convention that you
yes,
do that,
just
so to remind yourself where the loop is.
Right.
OK. Print sales, easy. It'll print the word sales on the screen. Input sales is telling the computer to expect something called sales, which will be, in this case, a number.
Right.
Right.
Now, draw is another command you haven't seen before. So let's just go through it. For month 1, print sales. You will input the sales, and then it says draw, month 1 again, and this little star means multiply. So it's 1 times 100, so it'll go along the bottom to position 100, and then the comma, and then sales, it will go up to a point of the number where you've got sales, and it will join that to the 0. And then it says next month, so it goes round the loop, and then it goes to 2. So it's doing in steps from 1 to 12, in even steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it goes 2, print sales, so you print sales for period 2, and then it draw 2 times 100, goes to 200, and it goes up and plots that point and joins it up to the last point.
And a lot of this is basic jargon, again, the language
Yes,
basic,
it's just
is that
basic.
Right? So if it seems puzzling, which it does slightly to me, I mean, once you've got the hang of the basic vocabulary, that would become more simple seeming.
Yes, the two things are always linked together. It's for months 1 to 12, for example, is always linked with something that says next month. So it always does the next month, and every month, but 1 at a time, up to 12.
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. End is pretty obvious. That's it's the end of the programme.
Yes.
That's a word I understand very clearly. Can we now run it?
Run it. Now it's asking you for sales in the bottom.
Well, you want in multiples of 100, rough, or rather in the hundreds, don't you?
Yes.
So let's say 500 to start with.
Let's join it
It's
straight
climbed up to, that is 500.
It's gone to the point 100, gone up to 500.
Well, let's imagine that February was a bit too cold for people to buy ice cream, so drop it down to 250. And there it is. It's very clever. And this is the sort of thing that the average business user could use.
Oh, yes, very easily.
And store away on a disk and keep
updating store it
month
and then
by month.
recall it every month and update the next point. And not only that, of course, he could just print it out on a printer. So if he wanted some copy, he could get it printed out on a little printer like this.
Right. So we need good graphics to help us understand the information a computer can give us. But we also need something else. Many people think that computers won't be really useful to us until they can speak. Well, that's something they can already do. You may well have seen the little speak and spell machine, little thing available in toy shops. And teach you to spell. We go for level of difficulty D. Are you ready for this? You want to learn how to spell, Mac?
Spell plunger.
Did you understand that word?
The computers seem to sound like
I've
you'd
gone
expect
off it.
computers to sound like.
Would you say that again, please?
Plunger.
I still don't understand it. What does it say?
Plunger.
Plunger. Fine, that's quite enough of that. But how do you actually get the business of speech recognition and speaking into a computer?
Well, that's very hard to do. You have to break down the word. At least the current techniques is to break down that word into various sounds and intensities and so on. It gets very, very complicated. But we can do something even with a little microcomputer.
Even with a microcomputer,
yes,
you can teach it to speak or
yes, you can
recognise speech.
Right. Well, I've actually put in a couple of words on this.
Right.
And perhaps you'd like to try and teach it another one with this microphone. So
try.
it is in the teach mode. And as soon as it comes up, we're going to have to repeat it 6 times. So
Right.
it gets a profile of you speaking this word, and then afterwards we can see whether it will recognise
It's
it.
quite close, don't you?
This is a very cheap little system, by the way. It's called Big Ears.
Hold that there for a moment.
Right.
Now it's
So it's
T for teach or L for listen, is that right?
Teach. I'm going to teach it.
Okay, type your word.
Run up tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Return. Now you have to be careful now.
Yeah. Tomorrow. 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 That was 6.
That was brilliant. Now we're going to see whether it will recognise our 2 voices. And I'll start with my 2 words, and then you finish with tomorrow and see if it works.
Go on then.
Right. We're going to get it to listen. L. C. It worked. That's good. I didn't think it was. U.
Beautiful.
Your turn.
Tomorrow.
I think that's absolutely
Marvellous.
brilliant.
Well done, Mac. That's a marvellous programme, and all in a little tiny box that size.
That's right. Well, you can imagine shouting, run at it, or open the door, and it would do
Yes.
things
Switch
for
on
you.
the central heating, pull the
Yes.
curtains, switch on
It's
the
a-
telly, boil the kettle. Wonderful.
It is a long way from dictating a letter into it and getting it typed out on a typewriter, but that will arrive one of these days.
Well, if real speech recognition, as Max says, is still in the future, and intelligible computer speech is expensive, music from the computer is already here today. Perhaps you may have seen this little gadget. It'll play notes in different instruments. And so on. What's more, it can even remember a tune played on it and play it back to you days later. Of course, this little keyboard is on the fiddly side, but attach a full-size keyboard to a microcomputer and the result can be an instrument that is capable of even more different sounds than a synthesizer. Recording studios are now using quite large mini-computers to produce some of their special musical effects. But if you want to know how some of the stranger sounds on today's discs are produced, the answer, as often as not, is from a small computer like this.
Outside the immediately creative sphere, what does a computer have to offer the artist?
It operates on a couple of important ways, I think. One, its use simply as a tool, like a pencil or a chisel or an airbrush or a flamethrower, whatever people want to use in their work. You can get the computer to draw pictures on a screen. Above and beyond that, though, it can actually deal with the concepts that people are themselves dealing with when they're making art, so that if somebody paints in a particular sort of way, to get the computer to help them to do it, they have to look inside their own head, as it were, to understand how they make the marks that they make.